going to present kind of a summary of our season and let our presenters fill in all the rest of the information for us. We had a slow start to our season. 5-5 in Zone 5. Love the symmetry? That was our first nest of the season. Our second nest was on 5-6, and that was in Zone 8. And then they just trickled in until about May 16th. And that's when we really started our nesting season in earnest. We only had 76 nests in May. So it made all of us think, oh my gosh, we're finally hitting a low year. But in June, we had 193 nests. In July, we had another 155. And August added another 9 nests, Plus we had 4 undetected nests. So for any of you who are real quick math doers in your head, you're gonna say, but Lynn, we had 438 nests and that only adds up to 437. Nest 434, when it was inventoried, the team determined that it was in fact an old nest and not a new one at all. So that's why there's an adjustment in that number. Our last nest of the season, which was just inventoried the other day, was nest 426, and that was on 8/19 that mama laid that nest, and that was in Zone 6. So Zone 6 had the honor of going out in mittens and coats and everything else to try and keep themselves warm while they did this inventory. The coyotes and the tropical storm Idalia did a number on interrupting our beautiful season. It was going along so nicely. We had not been screening nests since our coyote predations back in 2014. So the first thing we had to do was scramble to get screens out onto the nests that had already been laid. Thank you to all of you out there that helped me do that. It was a tremendous task to undertake, but it was worth it. And we started in Zone 2 because Zone 2 and Zone 3, they're on the eastern end of the island for anyone who doesn't know, that was where the coyote predations had begun. So we got those nests screened, and no sooner did we get those nests screened and the coyotes moved to Zone 4. And so we continued in Zone 4 and they continued moving west until we finally had the whole beach screened. But at that point, we started screening any and all new nests regardless of where they were on the beach. But the coyotes and the tropical storm, they were the low parts of the season. We did have some very positive and upbeat things happen this year. You folks all educated tons and tons of visitors through our shadowing program, which you'll be interested to know continues to grow on an annual basis. There are more and more folks who are interested in shadowing. It's less of a commitment. No, they're not all that disappointed that they don't get a shirt. They're learning what they want to learn, even though they can't actually perform the duties like turtle patrollers can. So you've done an awesome job doing that, and I thank you all very, very much. We also had a lot of newbies join our ranks this year. In fact, this year or last year, if you are a new turtle patroller, would you please stand? Welcome to the best job you'll ever have, and I hope our crazy season doesn't chase you away.
And best paid.
Best paid, absolutely. You know, when you think about it, I was really wondering and asked Jim Jordan why it was that we hadn't seen coyotes since 2014. And he said something to me that made a whole lot of sense. It was back in 2014 that they discovered that the SGAs, the second generation anticoagulants, were killing the bobcats. They also killed the coyotes. However, because we can't pick and choose, we're screening every nest next year right from day one. I want to thank Bill Tomei for his tremendous effort in getting screens, Steve Sager too, I'm sorry Steve, for getting screens cut, ready to go. The beginning of it was really very hectic, but now with no chicken dinner, we can buy more screens, Bill. Anyway, I can't believe nobody's given me the hook, so I'll give it to myself, and I will turn the microphone over to Michelle from DNR. And again, thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Lynn. I just want to thank everybody for inviting us here and giving us the opportunity to share in the celebration in the season for the Kiowa Island Turtle Patrol. Again, my name is Michelle Pate. I'm the coordinator for the Department of Natural Resources Marine Turtle Conservation Program, and I'll be talking to you a little bit about what we do. I'll probably summarize a few things that Lynn's talked about as well, and talk about some other things. I'll have Jeff come up and talk about our stranding stuff as well. We're going to have a pre-recorded talk from Dr. Brian Shamblin, because he was unfortunately not able to be with us tonight. So we've got all kind of good, interesting stuff for y'all to show y'all. So let's see if I can. All right. So our program is with the Marine Resources Division. We are the chief advocate of and steward of the state's living marine resources and their habitats. And so our division, we're headquartered out at James Island, is responsible for the management and conservation of the state's marine resources. And our program, specifically the Marine Turtle Conservation Program, is responsible for managing and protecting sea turtles for the state of South Carolina. So our program is real small. Here we are. We have 3 full-time biologists, myself, Jeff Schwinter, Meredith Bean, and here we are working on some of the state-managed beaches that we work on. Jeff is on Cedar, Meredith is on Otter, and I'm out there on North Island. So these are some of the areas that we cover that there are not dedicated volunteer projects working on. Most of these beaches are only boat accessible as well. In addition to that, we employ some summertime help to help us out on some of our off-site projects. This is Corinne Johnston. She is out at the Tom Yawkey Wildlife Center, which is in Georgetown County. This is an area that's 24,000 acres that is dedicated to conservation, research, and education. It was donated to the state by Tom Yawkey many years ago. Corinne was brave enough to come back and work with us for a second year. I don't know if many of y'all have been out to Tom Yawkey area. There are a lot of biting insects out there, a lot of things happening out there in the Wild Wild West. She takes about an hour to get to the beach in the morning by ATV. She's having to get by all these biting insects. Alligators that refuse to move out of the road in order to access the beach, but she did come back and work with us for a second year, so we were super happy about that. She marked and monitored 529 nests on South Island. She did have a little bit of a help during the summer with some part-time folks, one of which was Dr. Shamblin's graduate student that was out there as well. So yeah, we were super happy to have Corinne come back and help us. Our other off-site project is the Botany Bay Wildlife Management Area, located on Edisto Island. It's a little over 3,300 acres out that way. We had two techs this year, Annabelle Tovlin from California and Joey Bauer from Nebraska. Both joined us. Yep, she Midwest coming to work on the coast. They both came out there and worked for us for the summer, did a great job out there. Let's see, they had over 350 nests in that stretch of beach. It's a wildlife management area as well as Botany Island that's contiguous there. So they covered both those areas. Annabelle there on the left, Joey's over there talking with a group, Camp Wildwood, some students that come out each year. And then also, part of our team is Joshua Rattay. Y'all may have met him, some of y'all may have interacted with him. He's a graduate student with the College of Charleston that's working with our program. He is looking at diet study for his graduate work, looking at what Kemps, greens, and loggerheads are eating. Believe it or not, we do not have a published, any kind of published work on the foraging habits of sea turtles for South Carolina. So he is helping us out with that work. This is a poster he presented on some preliminary findings at CERSTM, the Southeastern Regional Sea Turtle Network meeting. That's correct. Lynn was there. This was in Orange Beach, Alabama, and had several folks presenting. Josh was there. Jeff's poster is actually to the behind Josh there. But yeah, he was looking at to see what sea turtles are eating. He was requesting animals that had stranded to be part of his collection. So any of you folks that are helping out with stranding response may have interacted with him as well. So he's learning a lot. We look forward to hearing more about his work, and we'll be able to report on it to y'all as well. So a lot of aspects of our program, one of which is education and outreach. We conducted our open house event this year at the Marine Sources Division. We do it every 2 years. Unfortunately, it's too much work to do it every year, so every 2 years. So if y'all weren't able to attend it this year, please come back 2 years from now. It's a great all-day event for everybody. As part of that event, we also introduce kids and adults about what a turtle excluder device is on our shrimping trawl nets. This is Jeff, kind of giving, showing how that works and that the turtle does come out and he's always up for a good guinea pig there. Also, as we get through the season, we start doing maintenance work on our equipment to put out on these off-site projects. We learn lots of skills. It's not just learning how to find nests, we also have to learn how to work all of our equipment as well. Then we load those ATVs up on the boat, and then we drive them out by boat to these islands. So it's real interesting trying to maneuver some of these things. Sometimes people give us funny looks on the road when they see us. We also work with our law enforcement division. This is the Chief Pilot, Owen Barker. We work with them throughout the year to fly the coast once a month. If you may see us, we fly about 200 feet off the ground along the coast. And we're looking for various things. We're looking for turtles live or dead. We're looking for illegal construction work going on. Anything that we can see out there. We can pretty much count horseshoe crabs from being 200 feet off the ground. So, and then we go about 1 mile offshore and fly at 900 feet and look at and do the offshore aspect of that. So that's something we work with those folks. We also look at trawlers that are out on opening day of the general trawl zone. And so this was a picture we took out there because I'm not sure if you can tell, but in the background there's a little bit of an oil spill back there. So when you're flying with law enforcement, you also have to report these types of items as well. Also, Meredith is heading up an in-water project where we are trying to remind boaters and folks that sea turtles exist more than just in the open ocean. They are in our nearshore and estuarine areas as well. So we've developed some signage. We're putting it up at boat ramps and boat marinas to try and educate folks and to solicit help from them by reporting if they come across any live, healthy sea turtles. So we've got a QR code on there. You hold your phone up to that, it takes you directly to a sighting form where you can report all the information about your observation as well as a photo to upload. Project is helping us kind of fill some data gaps, which are how many turtles, what size, what species are occupying these sort of estuarine areas, because we don't have any formal independent monitoring survey that goes on in those areas. So this is one way we are attempting to get that information. We also have some copies of that if anybody's interested in taking one with you and kind of looking at it later on. We would more than welcome anybody to participate in that. Earlier in the season, I came out with Lynn and folks to look at what the beach was looking like when we first started. So this was in early May. We had driven all the way down past the berm, only to find that at high tide it was difficult to get to the rest of the beach. This is about one of 4 breaks that are in what we call the Sandy Point area. And so, yeah, this was interesting to see how, these beaches change so much every year. It's all kind of challenges that go with working in this type of environment. So then this was from the other end of Sandy Point where we come up on the Stoner Inlet side. So our staff comes and does surveys of Sandy Point starting from there. Again, you can see erosion was really bad this year, as y'all know. Some of these photos that Lynn had shown in Cindy's presentation really showing the effects of that. You can see there's a rack line all the way to the right side of the picture, and then you've got the wetlands coming up behind it, the marsh is right behind it, so this area is getting completely washed over. Also this area, as y'all know, getting hit by coyotes. It was not free from that as well. But nevertheless, we did find 28 nests and 23 false crawls. That's a minimum amount reported because this is an area of the beach that is not covered 7 days a week. So that's a minimum amount that would be out there. Coyotes did affect most of the nest out there, and then the few that we did cage, the storms managed to get. So unfortunately, we did have less than 10% success rate out there. But we were able to document, we were able to collect some genetic samples, so we'll be able to continue on knowing some of that as well. Wasn't a complete loss. Sometimes on the way back, once we pull the boat in, we're able to save a diamondback terrapin. This is Jeff running to save. Jeff did his graduate work on diamondback terrapins, so he has a little soft spot in his heart for him. So we saved that one that day. Lynn touched on this as well. You know, we had an interesting start of the year. We actually experienced a spring for the first time in a long time. We had some really cool, nice spring-like temperatures all the way through the mid-June. So sea turtle season and nests started kind of right on time, but they were real slow trickling in. So as she said, y'all's first nest was on May 5th, which was just a few days after the first nest of the state was reported. And then your last one was about mid-August there. You get nests on those ends of the spectrum. Those are going to take the longest to incubate because of those cooler temperatures. So yeah, it's always makes it interesting there. Some other challenges, as Lynn's touched on. Y'all are not alone in this challenge. Coyotes are almost on every beach now, unfortunately. They're definitely in every county in the state and have been for a long time, but we didn't have to deal with them as much on our actual beaches, but they are definitely on every beach now. This is a kind of a screenshot of all of y'all's nests on Kiowa that were affected in some part by coyotes. It was historically focused down on the Sandy Point Inn, and then kind of, I guess that's zone 2 right there, just with the Ocean Club, and now it has spread all the way down the beach, unfortunately. I think y'all had 2 nests last year that were affected, and now this year it's over 100. So it's just something we have to deal with. They are not native to the state, but it would be considered a natural predator. So there are different methods to work with that, and we'll work again with Lynn and all of y'all to make sure that we can decrease that predation for next year. So she talked a little bit about Idalia, and water is the other main factor that we have to deal with in these coastal environments. You've got groundwater coming up, you've got higher than normal tidal events, you've got king tide events that have become more regular now, and we have hurricanes that come through. We were lucky that we didn't get too many storms this year, but we did get Idalia, which was not an opportune time, right, at the end of August. That was kind of the trifecta for that one. We had a tropical storm, we had a super blue moon, so second full moon of the month, it was a super moon, and then we had king tides all coming at the same time. So this really affected us. And it was unfortunate, also something that's hard to control, but I think you guys have a little over 40 nests that might have been affected by that. So, you know, one of the methods we do is relocation. That's why we allow folks to relocate nests. So, but sometimes you just can't come against these forces. But that's why they lay more than one nest, because one of them will survive. Something will survive. But despite all that, y'all did have a good year. You had 438 nests that you reported, 323 false crawls. That's a good ratio. That means you've got habitat out there. Turtles are able to find dry sand at some point to lay nests, so that's great. And well deserved. And so all of that coming together, you guys are working on the team. We've got folks that are working on other projects along the state. All of that's coming together to work towards our goal for sea turtle conservation, which is to promote the long-term survival and recovery of sea turtle populations. And what is recovery? Recovery is the process of removing threats so that a self-sustaining population persists in the wild. Our goal is that we get these turtle populations back where they need to be, and then they don't need our help. I know it won't be as much fun, but the goal is for them not to need our help anymore. That means we have done something good. So, and we do this by regular monitoring to assess trends, the estimations of mortality and the causes for that, protecting nests like y'all do, nesting beaches, as well as foraging areas. So we're looking at all aspects of sea turtle from egg to adult. And for those of y'all that maybe aren't as familiar, the turtles that are nesting in our area are part of the Northern Recovery Unit. It's just a management unit to delineate. That's a little bit of Southern Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia are all part of that Northern Recovery Unit. And then right there with that arrow, you can see within that Northern Recovery Unit, most of the nests, loggerhead nests, that are laid in that recovery unit are in our state. So you guys are doing a great job helping us protect that resource. And then at the end of the year, we get a whole bunch of these cards that we have to go through for the entire state. We have just started this process, so it's great to look at all this and see all the things that y'all are experiencing, what's going on. So we've got a long fall ahead of us, and we get all of that together and to come up with this one simple graph. No, we have a lot more than that, but to come up with this graph to see what the nesting trends are, what the nest counts. And so what this is showing is year 2000 through the current year. This is preliminary data. We had roughly 6,604 loggerhead nests in the state. We also had 19 green nests that were reported, and we have one confirmed Kemp's Ridley and a possible second one for the state. So this is a good looking trend. As you can see in the early 2000s, it's a lot lower. We're seeing that upward trend. There are up and down years because sea turtles do not necessarily nest every single year. They have to spend their winter time foraging and building up those resources in order to shell and lay eggs again. And so they don't necessarily come back every year. So we expect this up and down, but we're seeing a good upward trend. So that is a positive there. Lynn touched on this, but I'm gonna do it again. I want to recognize all the zone captains and drivers. If y'all don't mind standing up one more time, I'd like to give y'all another round of applause. I'd also like to thank the town of Kiowa Island as well for their support, for providing materials. Jim Jordan as well for helping out with the data. All of y'all come together for this to make this team happen, so appreciate the town supporting that as well. Wanted to give a little shout out that we finally got caught up on a couple logger headlines in case anybody's interested in seeing our summary from each year. We have them available online. You can go out to our website and then pick what year. They go all the way back. We also have a few copies over here. If somebody'd like to pick up a hard copy to take with them, we have those as well. All kind of good information there. I'd be remiss if I didn't give a little plug for our endangered species license plate that we have. If y'all want to show your support for and love for sea turtles, we'd love it if y'all would get one of these. They're through the DMV. And I think it's about $30 every 2 years, and a portion of that comes to endangered species projects with the Department of Natural Resources. So just wanted to give a little plug on that. Also, we are having our agency end of the season party. All volunteers and guests are invited to come. It is going to be Saturday, November 4th. We'll probably have some more detailed information about the year together, because we will have gone through some of those nest cards and all. Hopefully Brian will be able to show up there as well. But yeah, anybody is welcome to come to that, so wanted to let y'all know. We have you can RSVP at our seaturtles@dnr.sc.gov, which is our office email, if you're interested. And again, I just wanted to say thank you. We can't do the work that we do for the state without y'all. I mean, we're a party of 3. There's 187 miles of coastline in South Carolina, so it's a real team effort. And so we appreciate y'all's support, and thank you so much. So in lieu of Brian being here in person, he has pre-recorded he's got all kind of good information about the genetics study.
Good evening, everybody. I apologize for not being able to make it in person. We have some bugs circulating campus, and I didn't want to risk getting anyone sick. Wish I could have been there, but I'll do the best I can using this recording option. A lot of what I'm going to share tonight are based on analyses that I've done for our overall NRU project in the last funding cycle for NOAA. We still have a long way to go to try to get samples run from this year. We did just get data back from most of your samples this week, so I haven't really had time to analyze them yet. And the remaining samples, first runs, will be in the upcoming plates next week. But we do have 60% of your samples assigned to 125 individuals. We're much further behind for South Carolina and the NRU overall, but we do have 15% of the samples from South Carolina assigned, and 18% from the NRU overall. So we're looking at about 1,200 individuals back this year so far. So to date, that brings us up to 980 females that we've identified nesting on Kiowa since the beginning of the project, and 8,000 females for South Carolina, and we've crossed the threshold for 14,000 females for the Inland Recovery Unit overall. I'll revisit this toward the end in terms of subsampling. We're still pretty well short of what we need to be able to analyze all the samples from South Carolina this year in terms of funding. We're still looking. We are extremely grateful for all the donations that we have received. The biggest chunk so far this year has come from Hilton Head, donated about $50,000 among all the groups out there. And then we have smaller donations from Bali and Harbor, Edison Town, Isle of Palms and Sullivan's, and those have allowed us to run all the samples from their beaches, but we're still short, particularly for Cape Romaine, since that does represent the biggest chunk of nests on the South Carolina coast. And so at the end of the talk, I'll talk a little bit about some subsampling that we've done to try to explore how can we still squeeze as much information as possible from these samples without having to run all of them. One of the things that we analyzed for this particular report is differences in behavior between neophytes, so those new turtles showing up for the first time, and remigrants. And the biggest difference that we find between these two groups is in their nest site fidelity. So this just shows you the range and with the bins on the x-axis down here, and then the relative proportion of each group on the y-axis. And basically these neophytes are spreading their nests out over a pretty large area. The average distance between the southernmost and northernmost nests for these new females is about 62 kilometers, compared to remigrants that are spreading their nests on average across only 23 kilometers. So it's a pretty marked difference. And this is just one example of a female, and it shows that she's a bit on the extreme side, but she showed up first in 2016 in Lake Fork Clutches, and the distance between those was about 411 kilometers from south to north. When she returned in 2019, she also laid 4 clutches. 2 of those were on Kiowa. That's contained within that yellow box at the bottom. And you can see that's only 105 kilometers. And then when she returned in 2022, she also laid 4 clutches. All 4 of those were on Lighthouse Island, where the purple box is, which also happens to be where Mom is still nesting. So one of the things that we're learning from this data, now that we've got such long-term data to look at, is that these females, particularly in their first year, seem to be learning on the job, so to speak. They are calibrating their nest site fidelity. They're sort of calibrating their GPS units as they're nesting. I don't think it's something they can fully do in the water. I think it involves their crawling on the beach as well. And so you see it took her three years to end up where her mom ended up nesting. And so they're getting more precise with their site fidelity, but also potentially shifting that fidelity to be more reflective of where they likely hatched. Another really cool piece of data that came out of this final report are all the relatedness data that we looked at. So there were about 5,000 new females that started nesting between 2016 and 2022. And the proportion that they made up of the overall nesting cohort for a given year varied. It started out pretty high in 2016. It was 39% of all the 2016 females. By the time we got to 2021, it was down to 26%. And so we seem to be seeing this trend where we're seeing fewer of these new females coming in. They're making up a smaller proportion of the overall nesting cohort. And I think part of that is because if you think back in time to what the nesting looked like 25 or 30 years ago, we were seeing this increase in nesting through the mid-90s and late 90s, and then we started seeing those nest numbers fall in the early 2000s before we bottomed down in 2004. And so I think what we're seeing is we're still seeing a lot of really good recruitment, but that recruitment is slowing down because we're getting into that area where the nest numbers are starting to come down. We were able to assign 1,300 of these 5,000 females to a known mother in the database. And we did also sibling assignments for these turtles and found that 25% of all those 5,000 females had at least one full sister in the database. That is really remarkable. You know, we don't know exactly what survival looks like. We know it's bad, and I'm sure you've seen and heard, you know, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 3,000, 1 in 5,000. So if you stop and think about how we could be seeing full sisters that are returning, you know, that's maybe 5 clutches of eggs per mom on average, 110 eggs per clutch on average. You think about the hatching success that's necessary for that. You think about the fact that we have, not all of those hatchlings are female, obviously some are male. And then you throw multiple paternity in the mix where you have females mating with multiple males. So you have a lot of half siblings, but not a lot of full siblings. We don't really know how these numbers are going to work out, but we're extremely interested now in doing assessments to see, under the assumption of random survival at each of those steps, what would we expect the relatedness to look like? Because I'm pretty sure, even with our increasing nest numbers and knowing the population is growing, that we don't expect to see what we're seeing. And I wanted to start off sharing one of these families that is a Georgia family, but there is a Kiowa connection in here. And the reason I wanted to use this as an example is because in this case, mom was actually tagged on a flipper tagging beach by the Creator Research Project. So she gives us a little more context because we can go backwards in time with this female. So Boomer, this turtle was tagged by Creator Research Project in 1988. She's had 3 daughters recruit in this year class. In 2015, daughter 1 shows up. She false crawled on Wausau and only laid 1 clutch of eggs, so we weren't able to measure site fidelity for her in 2015. When she returned in 2019, she spread her nest over 123 kilometers. And her very first nest in 2019 was actually on Kiowa. And I think this is a situation where she nested and then she realized she was in the wrong spot. And so when she returned in 2022, all of her nests are down on Ossabaw Island on 4 kilometers. Her second daughter showed up in 2016. She nested as far south as Cumberland and as far north as Blackbeard. So that's 72 kilometers. In 2019, she nested on Little St. Simons and Sea Island, so that's 13 kilometers. When she returned in 2022, that was 2 kilometers. She's just on Little St. Simons. And her third daughter showed up in 2016 as well. She crawled as far south as Jekyll and as far north as Blackbeard. When she returned in 2020, she's nesting on Blackbeard, so 7 kilometers. So these nicely illustrate that shift in site fidelity behavior. It's not just that the neophytes and remigrants are different, we can actually follow these neophytes as they turn into remigrants and see this shift happen. The other thing that I wanted to mention here is longer remigration intervals. So the other thing that we're noticing about these new females is it's taking them longer to return than for remigrants in the same nesting year cohort. Excuse me. So we are seeing them take about a year longer on average to come back than remigrants. And I imagine it's just, as them being first-time mothers, it's just taking them longer for their bodies to recover and for them to replenish that energy that they've used, not only to yolk all those eggs, but also to migrate back to the nesting beach for the first time. So I mentioned multiple paternity. We don't have a lot of great data on this. The data that we do have for the NRU comes from Wausau Island. This is some work by Jake Lasala when he was a graduate student at Georgia Southern. He looked at this for 3 years and found that about 75% of the nests had more than one father contributing, and on average it was about 2.6 fathers across all the clutches. It was 195 males, and none of those males were repeated across females, and none of those males were repeated through time for the remigrant females. And so that led him to ask, are there a lot more males out there than we think they are? Are there a lot more males out there than females? And then potentially, in seeing that there were no repeats, even for the remigrant females, he asked the question of, are we seeing mating along migratory corridors and not just right at the nesting beach? So this came up last year when Lynn brought to our attention a lot of the social media and just media in general that Betty Zirkelbach was doing from the Turtle Hospital, highlighting concerns about a lack of male hatchling production based on Jeanette Weineken's work at FAU, at Gumbo Limbo. And so knowing more about these males is important for a few reasons. One is that it puts our relatedness data into context when we're thinking about sisters versus half-sisters and where those male contributions are coming in. So the relatedness data that we're getting here is allowing us to look backwards in time and look at what the males were up to 25 or 30 years ago. And I was probably a little too dismissive about the concern about not having enough males around. So one of the things that we're seeing is, Jake was right, along with many others, we are, I think, seeing mating along migratory corridors. So in this case, we have a really nice example where we have a mother nesting in a particular area, and then we have a daughter nesting right there in her neck of the woods. And in this case, it was the purple box here is Onslow Beach, Camp Lejeune, and then she has a daughter nesting right there on the same beach and a little bit further south. The blue box at the bottom is a mom that nests on Hilton Head, was last detected nesting in 2014. She's had a daughter recruit that's nesting on Paris Island and on Wausau. These turtles, these two daughters, share the same father. They were assigned to the same unknown male, 1279. And so here we have a case where these daughters obviously show strong site fidelity. They're nesting where mom nested, but they're nesting 400 kilometers apart. So I think that shows that we are seeing mating along migratory corridors, which reinforces the need for looking at these male contributions at a regional scale. We can't go in and do multiple paternity studies on one beach and get a good snapshot, because those males that we're picking up are also mating with other females. That's affecting the breeding sex ratio, and part of the ameliorating effect of having these extra males is going away, because what we're doing is we're bringing that breeding sex ratio down closer to a 1-to-1 rather than being male biased. So I've got a few more family groups here. This one is in North Carolina, and it's exceptionally large, but I just wanted to show it to show you how these males are contributing in multiple clutches. So this mom was an unknown mom, 292. We did not detect her. She must have stopped nesting before we started the project. She had 4 daughters with this particular male, 382. This male also mated with a known female that nests on Bald Head and produced a recruit in 2016. This unknown mom also mated with unknown male 383, who produced 4 daughters. Well, this male also mated with another unknown female and has 2 daughters that have recruited. And this is where they're nesting. So, obviously this is very messy, but the point of all this is to show you that these 2 males are contributing to daughters that are recruiting over about 100-kilometer area here. And so we really need to look at what the males are up to at a regional scale, just like what we're trying to do. And then finally, I can at least share one really interesting Kiowa family with you all. And it's this mother 88 that was last detected nesting in 2020. She has 4 daughters that came from this male 1795. Then also mated with this unknown male 1796 to produce this one recruit. And then that male in turn also mated with another unknown female and produced this recruit here. This mom is really interesting. She, at the very beginning of the genetics project, nested on Ossabaw Island in Georgia. But most of her nests since then, since 2015, have been on Kiowa. The interesting thing about her is that her daughters actually are nesting in both Georgia and South Carolina. So I think the behavior that we picked up on in 2009 has been going on a very long time, long before that. And she's one of the females that has had strong site fidelity within a year, but has still moved around between years. And so we have these daughters that recruited in 2019 in Georgia. One is now mostly nesting down on Sapelo. Actually, both are pretty much nesting down on Sapelo now. We have a daughter that's nesting right here on Kiowa and on the north end of Edisto. And then we have these other daughters that are nesting also further north. So daughter 4 that are nesting on Isle of Palms and Lighthouse, and daughter 3 nesting mostly on Kiowa, but when she first started nesting, she nested as far north as South Island. When she's returned now in 2022, she's nesting just on Kiowa. So it's showing a lot of these broader connections. Another thing that we looked at is how we can tie that recruitment back to known mothers. So in this case, what we're looking at are sourced bins for the moms. So these are females that the center of all of their nesting was in bin 4, which is basically down on the Georgia border and includes Hilton Head. You can see here most of the turtles that have mothers nesting in bin 4 have daughters that are recruiting in bin 4, but you see connections across the entire MRU here. We can also flip this around and look at this from the perspective of the receiving bin for those recruits and like asking the question of where their mothers are nesting. And again, you see most of the turtles, the new turtles in bin 4 have mothers nesting in bin 4, 52, but almost as many are coming from bin 5, which is you all. Bin 5 are the Charleston area nesting beaches, basically Edisto and Kiowa would be in bin 5. And so you can see that you all are contributing almost as many new turtles to your south down to Hilton Head as Hilton Head is contributing to Hilton Head. If we look at this from bin 5's perspective, 73 of the females that are nesting on your beaches look like they have mom nesting there as well. But again, we have some overlap to the north and south, almost equal. So 47 of the turtles that are hatching probably on your beaches are nesting down in bin 4, and 44 that likely hatched, or at least have mom nesting on your beaches now, are up at the refuge at Cape Romaine. And then again, if we look at this from the perspective of the receiving bin, 73 females that are nesting on your beaches, likely hatched there, have mom nesting there. 66 look like they are coming from Cape Romaine. So almost as many of your new turtles are coming from Cape Romaine as are coming from your beaches. And this is what that recruitment looks like from the perspective of the moms at Cape Romaine. You can see connections throughout the entire NRU. Cape Romaine is contributing basically 40% of all the new turtles that we could assign to the mother. So it's an outsized contribution even relative to the nesting that's happening there, which is about 25% of the entire subpopulation. And this is just looking at this from the perspective of the receiving bins. 297 of the new females at bin 6 have moms nesting there. But you all are contributing as well. You can see that arrow from bin 5, 44 females that likely hatched on your beaches are now up nesting in Cape Romaine. So this is reinforcing the idea that natal homing is not perfect. They're not going back to the island necessarily where they hatched. They're coming back to a region. And I think it reinforces the importance of us continuing to collect regional data to the extent that we can. So to revisit the relatedness, we're seeing what looks like not random survival. We really need to get to the bottom of that, I think, because has implications for population persistence. We're concerned about global warming. One of the potential concerns is population feminization, so the lack of male production. The other issue is just that the hotter nests tend to produce turtles that aren't as fit. There's a lot of research on this that's looked at various fitness indices, and what they're finding is the hotter nests are producing, yes, more females, but also smaller hatchlings. They're narrower. They're probably more prone to depredation by a lot of fish species that are gape limited. They have poor self-righting ability. It takes them longer to flip themselves over, and where they've measured crawl speeds, they tend to rest more often, crawl more slowly. They also have been shown to produce less swimming thrust in the water. And then more recently, Dr. Weineken's lab has looked at this. Because she is doing the sexing of a lot of these hatchlings, they have to keep them in captivity until they get big enough to actually do the laparoscopic work. And what she's finding is that not only are they smaller with these hotter nests, but they are growing more slowly. So they are going to be more vulnerable to predators for longer. So I think, where we are with the NRU project, we definitely want to keep it going, but we also recognize that it's pretty resource intensive. Given everything that we've seen in the data, we think we need to maintain as much of the spatial network of sampling as we can. And so that means focusing on temporal subsampling. Where I've started looking at that is at the refuge at Cape Romaine, just because of the sheer numbers of nests there. And so far it looks kind of promising, actually, that we could still capture most of the data with a subsampling approach. We obviously want to keep it simple on you all as well. If we aren't going to be able to sample every nest and run every nest, if we take a sample from every other nest at the refuge, we would still capture 90% of the females. And even those that we didn't pick up, if we maintain full coverage on the adjacent beaches, we would pick up about 5% more of those. So we would capture the vast majority of females, and we would cut our costs significantly because we don't want to be running every other nest. The data that we've got have us asking a lot of questions. One thing that I mentioned to you all last year, and I think it's really important, is that we be able to age these females. It really helps us maximize the relatedness data And the other really cool thing is we are getting in a window where the new females that are coming in, they're hatching in the early 90s. And as we get in those early and mid 90s windows, that's when we have fantastic nesting beach data that you all have collected as a network. So we know number of nests, we know how many hatchlings roughly probably are hitting the water. So imagine if we could age these new turtles and pin them to a really narrow window of years that they likely hatched in. We could legitimately generate estimates of survival from hatchling to adulthood at that point. And so we wouldn't be throwing these, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 5,000, 1 in 10,000 numbers around. We would have real numbers to work with. We do, I think, need to look at how many males are out there now. The relatedness data of the nesting females is telling us about the males 25 or 30 years ago. We need to know how many males are out there right now as baseline data. If we could supplement our sampling with some dead hatchlings at inventory, and maybe even use those as the nests that don't get sampled on the front end or don't get run on the front end, I think that could be really valuable for figuring out how many males are currently breeding. I think we also need to know how many are hatching. And just like the epigenetic aging, I think there are going to be epigenetic sexing markers for hatchlings available relatively soon in the next 5 years or so. So that we can take a tiny little blood or skin sample from a hatchling and know whether it's male or female. And then finally, this last piece that I talked about, the fitness. I think we really need to integrate all of this into a study where we're putting data loggers in nests, we're able to sex the hatchlings, but then we also have these fitness indices. Because I think there's something really strange happening with survival. I think we have a lot of moms that are more than replacing themselves, and we have a lot of other moms that may nest their entire lives and never have a daughter come back. And we need to figure out what is driving that pattern to make our populations as resilient as we can. I just want to thank everyone again. I really appreciate all the support the Conservancy has shown in fundraising to allow us to wrap up the 2022 samples and get started this year. And a huge thank you to Patrol as well for collecting the donations at the farmers market. We got that last week and we'll stretch it as far as we can. I really, really appreciate it. I hope we can find a way to keep this project going at some scale, because I think it's really valuable.
Go ahead and feel free to stretch your legs if you need to. Brian always packs a lot of good stuff in his talks, so I'm not gonna be offended if people are walking about the room while I switch gears. Yeah, so this is the second year, I think, that we've added the stranding portion into the evening. So I'd like to start off with an interesting Kiowa turtle, and I think I went ahead and picked the most interesting Kiowa stranding we've had in quite some time, which was back in 2018. The picture on the left actually shows there's 2 loggerheads in there that you can kind of make out. The one on the left is the same turtle as the turtle on the right-hand side, and it was wrapped up in a crab pot rope and submerged in a tidal pool. The Kiowa folks called us, we got it out, got it to the aquarium, and on the right you can see what it looked like when it was brought there, and the smaller picture is a close-up shot of the head when it got ready to go back home. But the turtle on the right-hand side in that submerged picture was a second loggerhead that was attached to the live one, and unfortunately that was dead. So, yeah, that was an interesting case. Okay, so we're going to talk about strandings really quickly. First of all, what is a stranding? According to the NOAA definition, a stranding refers to a sea turtle that is found dead or is alive, but it's otherwise unable to go about its normal behavior due to an injury, some type of illness, or some other problem. And these stranded sea turtles can be found washed ashore or floating in the water. You'll remember that all species of sea turtles are currently protected by the federal government, where each sea turtle recovery plan for each species, which is developed jointly by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and NOAA. All of those recovery plans highlight the need to have an active stranding network for each species. According to NOAA, then, the aims of the network are fourfold. The network aims to improve the understanding of the causes of death of sea turtle species and existing threats to sea turtles, wherever they may be. Data should be collected in accordance with consistent, standardized protocols across volunteer groups, trained biologists, and across the states within the network. The network aims to provide sea turtle parts or samples for conservation-related research. And the network aims to monitor stranding trends and ensure the availability of timely data for conservation management decisions. And within South Carolina, the network was formally established beginning in 1980, so we're currently in the 44th year of the network. And the origins of the network in South Carolina actually predate the more widely known nesting surveys that you all are a part of today. And so they serve really as one of the first widespread examples, for sure, of what's now known as citizen science. On to Kiowa Island then, in the 2023 stranding year. Statewide in 2023, thus far, we've recorded 135 strandings, which includes 53 green turtles, 42 loggerheads, 38 Kemp's Ridley, 1 leatherback, and 1 carcass that could not be identified. The 2023 year should end up being relatively common in terms of stranding numbers. As you can see, there's an 11% increase compared with last year. But overall, the numbers are approximately equal to the most recent 5-year stranding average numbers for South Carolina. Many of you have seen this before, like the nesting graph. We'd like to show this from year to year just so you get a snapshot of how it changes between stranding seasons. The graph shows the annual statewide number of strandings going back to 1980 for all sea turtle species within the state. You can see the general pattern is one of alternating small year-to-year peaks, declines, but they maintain a relatively consistent magnitude between years. And certainly we're a long way from the huge numbers seen in the early days of the program. The 5-year average, including this year, stands at 141 stranded sea turtles per year, and the 10-year average is 163. So to Kiowa Island specifically, Kiowa saw 9 strandings. I say saw, but there's still time left in 2023, so we'll see. So Kiowa has seen 9 strandings so far in 2023, 4 loggerheads, 3 green turtles, and 2 Kemp's Ridley. That ties Kiowa with Sullivan's Island for 3rd place across the state in terms of specific stranding locations. Between Hilton Head with 18 and Charleston Harbor had a rough year this year with 11. And then there are a multitude of other, what we call other locations, which are typically inshore creeks or waterways instead of more ocean-facing beaches. And those other locations have accounted for 17 strandings so far this year. If you compare Key Island with the rest of the state, we also see that over the last 2 decades or so, Kiowa strandings have sort of stabilized to account for about 10% or less of the stranding statewide in any given year, with the average for the most recent 10 years being about a little under 4.5% of statewide strandings each year occurring on Kiowa. We're all obviously here tonight to celebrate the loggerhead nesting season, but I guess I need to give a plug that there are other turtles, sea turtle species in South Carolina. Most of you are probably familiar with the fact that 4 of the 7 species of marine turtles worldwide occur in South Carolina, commonly occur within South Carolina. The loggerhead, of course, is the most common, nesting on our beaches, but with 4 of the 7, we obviously see it stands to reason that many of our strandings are coming from other species. So we also see leatherbacks, which migrate through state waters during the spring and the fall. Green turtles, which are observed in nearshore waters and in small numbers nesting on our beaches. And the Kemp's Ridley, which is a rare nester on our beaches, but is a relatively common inhabitant of coastal waters in South Carolina. We saw this diversity stranding-wise at Kiowa in 2023. The season sort of started with a bang on back in April with the stranding of a live green turtle on April the 1st. This turtle was successfully rehabbed and recently released. That was followed up the next day, unfortunately, by a live juvenile loggerhead on April 2nd. Both of these turtles, as you can probably tell from the picture, exhibited signs of some sort of long-term chronic disease. The loggerhead unfortunately later died. That was followed on May 28th by a larger, likely subadult size loggerhead, which stranded freshly dead with no apparent wounds or other abnormalities. And then on July 17th, a juvenile Kemp's Ridley stranded on Kiowa in a state of moderate decomposition, but with no major wounds or other abnormalities apart from maybe an old healed injury behind its right eye there, which is kind of hard to see in the picture, but overall it looked in pretty good shape, so not sure what happened with that turtle. Kiowa unfortunately really hit its stride in August. In terms of strandings, things really got going there with the stranding of a juvenile green turtle on August the 12th, and then a juvenile loggerhead a week later on the 19th. Both of these turtles were victims of boat strike interactions. That was followed by 2 strandings on August the 20th, the first of which was a highly decomposed, large, possibly adult-sized loggerhead, kind of hard to tell. And then juvenile Kemp's Ridley, that was the victim of a likely shark attack. You can see the head and almost all of the distal part of the flippers is missing. And then on August 29th, live juvenile green turtle was recovered from the beach, and this turtle also exhibited some shark attack wounds, but is lucky one, made it out alive, and it's currently receiving rehabilitation. When you have 135 strandings in a year, you can see that from the blue dots on this map, we get them all over the place. We see them from the North Carolina border to the Georgia border, on the beaches and in the waters a fair distance inshore. And with the small staff Michelle talked about, we can't quickly get to all of these to document a carcass or to transport a live animal. So I want to acknowledge Lynn and Cindy for being there whenever we call them, and boy, do we call them. As evidence of this, they've even assisted us this year with several cases that were not at Kiowa Island, including a live green turtle that was stranded on Folly Beach in April with some sort of long-term disease and was just released recently. A young green turtle was reported found in a creek behind Botany Bay on the Botany Island on the North Edisto River on July 22nd. And this turtle was a fresh victim of a recent boat strike. And a young Kemp's Ridley caught on a hook and line was the most recent one. This was by a recreational fisher on the Charleston Battery downtown on September 6th and is still undergoing rehabilitation. So thanks again to Cindy and Lynn for being there whenever we call you and going to Turtles on the Island, off the island. Maybe you'll answer the phone next year, we'll see. So that brings us with those three off Kiowa turtles, brings us to a total of 9 Kiowa strandings and 3 others that occurred and were documented by the Kiowa team. 5 green turtles, 4 loggerheads, and 3 Kemp's Ridleys this year. The cause of stranding for these turtles is as follows. We had 3 with watercraft interactions, 3 diseased turtles, 2 with shark attack injuries, 2 with what we call no apparent injuries. We can't really tell, they have no injuries, so we can't otherwise really tell what happened to them that caused them to strand. 1 caught on a recreational hook and line, and 1 with an unknown cause. That was that highly decomposed loggerhead. So how does that relate to what we see statewide? So this graph shows the statewide probable cause of stranding for 2023. If you look at this from year to year, sort of like the column graph, it's holding pretty similar in terms of cause, at least for the major causes within each year. 35% of the strandings this year are attributed to watercraft strikes, 20% stranded with no apparent injuries, 16 from incidental entanglements with some sort of fishing gear, 13 with unknown causes, and again, this is mostly due to the state of decay of the carcass. 6% stranded due to disease, 3% due to shark attacks, and 2% due to other causes, which are generally, can't say 100% this year. Most years, these other causes are nesting females that got caught in roots, the tide flipped them over, and when the beach patrol came down the beach, the turtle was upside down and needed some sort of assistance, or she crawled the wrong way and now she's a long way from the tide line and it's getting to be 100 degrees outside, and so we had to assist her back to the ocean. And then 5% of turtles fall into an unable to assess category. That's where we the carcass can generally not be recovered. We get a picture and maybe the tide takes it away, or it's already falling apart, and by the time somebody gets there, there's not much left to be able to do a whole lot with. I want to again thank Lynn and Cindy for 3 of the strandings being recovered by the Kiowa team and saved for us to come and collect for necropsy for the graduate student project that Michelle touched on earlier. So these are obviously, we don't want to see turtles washed up ashore, and we don't want to see them, certainly don't want to see very fresh carcasses that are, recently dead. So, but when we do, we try to get as much information off them as we can. So we thank you for providing those for Josh's project. Let's see here. One of the questions everybody always asks of us, I feel like when we go to do presentations, especially children love to ask how big do sea turtles get, how long do they live, like Brian just touched on. A lot of things go into that and you don't always know how to answer the question, so I thought tonight to change it up a little bit from those of you who listened to information about dead turtles last year. I'd finish with the size distribution of what we see in a normal stranding year. So first, the breakdown for loggerheads. So shown here is the curved length of the turtle shell. What do we see across our loggerhead data? The approximate size transition to becoming an adult loggerhead is shown there by the orange line. And you can see that going back to 1980, we primarily encounter juvenile loggerheads in our stranding data. About 70% of all loggerheads stranded since the start of the network in South Carolina in 1980 are juvenile-sized turtles. That was the case for the 3 loggerheads from Kiowa this year, from the Kiowa team. Some of those might have been off the island. So we 3 of the 4 we had measurement data for those carcasses, and those are shown by the circles here. One of those was among the smaller size classes that we generally see, and 2 were in the 70 to 80 centimeter range, which is approaching adulthood for the species. And when I talk about sizes, I like to remind myself that not everybody deals in the metric system, so when you talk to children, 70 centimeters and 110 doesn't really mean anything to them. So to put it on a scale, how big does a sea turtle get? 50 centimeter loggerhead has a shell that's about 1.5 feet long. This is just the top side of the shell, so not including any part of the fleshy part of the turtle. The shell is about 2.5 feet in length as they approach maturity, and then a very large adult loggerhead in South Carolina would be about 3.5, a little more than 3.5 feet in length. For green turtles, the records are dominated by small individuals in the 20 to 40 centimeter range. That was the case with all of the green turtles handled by the Kiowa team this year, which are shown here as circles on the graph. And we've only seen a few, maybe 5 or less, adult green strandings since 1980 in the state of South Carolina. And adult green turtles can reach larger than loggerhead size for adults, and they typically transition to adulthood somewhere between 85 to 100 centimeters, depending on the population. So we're seeing quite small green turtles. Kemp's ridleys transition to adulthood at approximately 60 centimeters in shell length. Again, similar to the green turtles, we see a significant portion of young juvenile Kemp's ridleys in our strandings each year. But this time it's accompanied by a little bit more diversity with a number of adult and subadult size ridleys also encountered. And that's sort of what we saw with the Kemp's ridleys encountered by the Kiowa team this year. They were distributed among all of these size groupings below adult size. And again, to put it on more of a familiar scale, most of these are turtles quite small. The shell is about 10 inches long, would be a 25 centimeter animal, and an adult Kemp's ridley, 60 centimeters, is only about 2 feet long, so they're quite small. And I'll finish up with this. I know most folks are familiar with thinking about the size of turtles probably by the size of a nesting adult female loggerhead. So I'd like to show this graphic or something like it from time to time that depicts the sizes, relatively the sizes of the 3 turtles that I've talked about. The loggerhead there in orange, the green turtle next to it, and then the Kemp's ridley, which is the smallest of the world's sea turtle species at adult size. So yeah, thank you for the invitation tonight to speak, the opportunity to talk about the stranding side of our work. Thank you, as always, to all the stranding responders, the volunteers we have across the state and here on Kiowa. I'll leave with the reminder, as Lynn and Cindy know, that if you encounter a turtle, whether it's floating offshore or in a creek or river somewhere, or it's washed up dead on the beach or alive and you think it needs some sort of trained responder to come and assess the situation, you can call South Carolina DNR Law Enforcement Dispatch 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that message at this number here, that message will be quickest way, they'll relay it to us so that we can promptly get some member of our stranding network to quickly respond. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about stranded turtles.
Thanks to Jeff, Michelle, Brian, the whole team at DNR. I am proud to let you all know that for the first time, we actually have Melissa Ranley and 2 of her interns here to speak to us. They are from the Turtle Care Center. So it's not just aquarium folks, it is our direct link to the hospital. I'd like to introduce Melissa. Thank you.
That's all right.
Let's see, where is my,
Go to the right.
this one?
1, 2, 3 more.
I can't see.
One more. One more. Down. Yep.
No.
You're good.
I got a real weird angle to do that. All right, well, hello, everyone. It's so great to see you all. As Lynn said, my name is Melissa Ranley. I'm the Sea Turtle Care Center manager from the South Carolina Aquarium. And I have brought some of my staff here with me today. It's great to see so many familiar faces, but I wanted to introduce some of our new faces. So we have Grace Bushiazzo, you can say hi, and Allie Portermarsh. And Grace and Allie both come to us with a plethora of experience in sea turtle rehab and even nesting and other conservation work from Florida, Texas, lots of places. So we've got a great team, and we had a really good year so far. I say so far, like Jeff mentioned, and I'm not convinced that it's done yet. The water's still warmer than I'd like to see for sea turtle strandings. We might still see a few. We also, if you aren't aware, we also often help out other areas in the winter months when we are slower with our strandings here in South Carolina. We'll offer some assistance to New England when they have large cold stun stranding events where they have over 500-600 turtles stranded in a very short period of time. So we get those animals flown down to us. And we'll help rehabilitate those. So I'm going to go over some of our numbers that we've had for the year, but keep in mind that could still change. All right, and hopefully you've all had a chance to come out to the South Carolina Aquarium and see the Sea Turtle Care Center and the aquarium as a whole. But as Michelle mentioned, sea turtle conservation is a really multifaceted effort that really takes all kinds. And we are just one little piece of that puzzle, and that's the rehabilitation side. Again, without nest protection and all of the other education and conservation work, sea turtles, that's really what it takes. We always say it takes a village to help save sea turtles, and the few turtles that we get to see in our hospital, our goal is to rehabilitate them, get them back out in the wild, get them back into that breeding population so that you all can continue to protect their nests and we can keep that generation going for millions more years. And so this year, I want to go over a little bit of our numbers so far. We have admitted 29 patients into the Sea Turtle Care Center. You can see the breakdown there by species. We've had 16 greens, 10 kemps, and 3 loggerheads, which I'm going to talk to you about that a little bit later on when we talk about admissions. But we have had a really successful release year so far. We've released 36 patients, and that's really exciting for the number of patients that we've had in the hospital this year. Obviously, some of those were from last year, but 36 is our second highest year for patients released. And the first of that list would have been in 2017, which was one of our highest admits ever, of course. 2016 and 2017 were when we had the most patients admitted to the hospital. So it would make sense that 2017 we had really high releases, but we're really excited about getting 36 already back out there.
And we have 9 patients still in-house receiving care. Of course, again, releases, that's the ultimate goal. That is what we do this for, to get these patients back out there and into that breeding population. So let's see, I skipped over one key point there. So we've had 36 patients released this year. We've actually had 398 since we opened in 2000. And one of the really cool things when you think about that is that it took us 20 years to get to 300 turtles released. We released our 300th turtle in late 2020, and now less than 3 years later, we're about to release our 400th, probably in the next release or two. So that turtle is probably in-house right now with us. So we'll see. We'll probably have to do that next year when it's warmer, or get them down to Florida or wherever we need to release them. But seeing that it took 20 years to get to 300, and we're already 100 more since then in 3 years is really exciting. And again, that's the ultimate goal, is getting these turtles back out there and keep that conservation effort going. So this is a graph of our patient admissions by year, and then you'll see it's also broken down by species. And it was interesting when I saw Michelle's graph of nesting numbers. Our graph looks pretty similar here. Hopefully that's a correlation. Obviously lots more turtles in our area nesting. We are seeing these patients. Obviously we've got more turtles in our area now. And so you can see that over the years, the number of patients coming into the hospital has grown. One of the things that I think is really interesting, if you look at, we're talking about loggerheads nesting, right? We see all those loggerheads nesting. If you look at the most recent few years, our loggerhead numbers in the hospital have actually gone down. I started at the Sea Turtle Care Center here in 2019, came from Florida, where I've been doing this for 20 plus years there. And when I first started, they told me we see mostly loggerheads. And I was not convinced in 2019 when we saw very few loggerheads and lots of greens and Kemp's Ridleys, and I was convinced that they followed me up from Florida. And that has kind of been the trend here for the last several years as well. We've had few loggerheads. This year we've actually only had 3 loggerhead patients, and the only year that we had less than that was our very first year that we opened. And we only had 2 turtles that whole year, and it was 2 loggerheads. So really interesting to see that, whether that's just artifact, I don't know, but pretty interesting. But we are seeing a lot of those younger, smaller juvenile turtles, like Jeff mentioned. And this is a graph of all the cause of stranding for the patients that we've seen in the hospital this year in 2023. And you can see that the one thing that was not on the Jeff's graph was the fisheries interactions, and that's because a lot of those hooked turtles are coming to the hospital. So we're seeing that the last few years that has been one of our highest incidents for stranding, and that's actually a good thing to us. It's not that there's more turtles getting hooked than there used to be. It's that the education on the piers and the education in the community that don't cut the line and throw the turtle back in. There's a place for them to go. There are people that you can call. They know to reach out to the Department of Natural Resources and get that animal brought in for care. And so that's a great thing, actually, that those animals are coming to us. And we can get most of those hooks out pretty easily. Some of them require surgery, and they're going to take a lot longer to heal. But that's a really good thing in our book, that there's more education out there and more recognition on what to do when you find an injured turtle. The second highest was boat strikes, which makes sense when you're looking at the straining graphs that Jeff showed earlier. And then debilitated turtle syndrome is kind of the third highest there. Predatory attacks, usually shark bites. We're going to show you some of those pictures of some of the turtles that Jeff mentioned from Kiowa, and I'll go into that a little bit more. But this is a pretty standard year. Obviously the incidence of stranding is going to fluctuate every year a little bit, but this is pretty standard with what we see for our cause of strandings. Another thing that we are monitoring closely and that we've been tracking since we opened in 2000 is the incidence of marine debris ingestion. Obviously we all know that there are plastics building up in there out in the oceans, and that these animals are unfortunately ingesting those things, whether they're tangled up in their food source and they can't really identify that or what the reasoning. We've seen everything from, large plastic bags, food wrappers, things where you can actually literally read the writing on the piece of plastic still, to balloons. And so we've been monitoring that closely. You can see that graph is pretty consistent with the intakes, but one of the things is the last 3 years, we're happy to see that we've only had 2 cases each year. And so we're really thankful for that. And sometimes that's not even the root of the stranding that the turtle comes in for. It might be a boat strike or something else, but as the turtle's there and throughout their rehabilitation process, we see them pass those plastics. Sometimes we know that turtle comes in with a buoyancy issue. We do x-rays, we do CT scans, and we see that their gut is completely impacted, and we might have to go in surgically and remove some of that. Fortunately, a lot of these smaller pieces, these animals are able to pass on their own. We've had 2 patients in-house that have had that this year and actually have both been able to be released, so we're really thankful for that. But that's definitely something we're keeping an eye on and monitoring really closely. Now this is preaching to the choir with this group. You already know what people can do to help sea turtles, but this is another real big part of what we do. Of course, our goal is to physically rehabilitate these animals, but also to educate the public on what they can do to help sea turtles. And that's something that I'm sure a lot of you who are working out on the beaches are doing this, all of these outreach programs and things that we all do in our sea turtle conservation community are really what are gonna help save turtles. So we can rehabilitate as many as we can a year, but the more people that we can actually reach and kind of educate them about those issues, the better. And nest protection obviously is something huge that you all are doing here that is really invaluable to the conservation of sea turtles. I wanted to talk a little bit about the 2 live turtles that Jeff mentioned that actually came from Kiawah. Andre was the first case. That was the one that, as he mentioned, was already recently released. This turtle was rescued here on Kiawah in April. And I've got the, I'm not going to say admit weight, because sometimes the admit weight is not the lowest weight. If you look at the amount of barnacles and pluff mud and sometimes leeches and crabs and all kinds of things on them, their admit weight might actually be higher than their next weight or their third weight. Because they do end up coming in with a lot of material. Sometimes they're also really blocked up, and once they start to defecate, we see their weight go down a lot after that as well. But so the lowest weight that this turtle actually reached was 5.2 pounds, and they were released at 7.4 pounds. This turtle came in, and actually another thing that we see when you look at that first picture, they don't really look that thin. They're a little thin. Sometimes they come in very edematous too. So that edema starts to go down, that swelling, that fluid, and all of a sudden the turtle looks like skin and bones. And that was the case with Andre. They gave us a really good scare. They got very thin, even despite eating. It took a long time to get their immune system working, to get their digestion working, get their metabolism working to where they were gaining weight. And they were picky eaters sometimes, and very picky about their vitamins as well, as you can imagine with some of these animals. But we were really thankful that they turned a corner. It took them a little while, but once they turned that corner, they started to gain weight. They started to look great. And you can see the picture on the right of Ashley, who is my other sea turtle biologist who unfortunately couldn't make it. So you got a chance to meet Grace and Allie, but Ashley unfortunately couldn't be here tonight. But that's a good picture of her releasing Andre there. You can see how happy and hefty that turtle looks there, being released right there out in Cape Romaine, which is a great habitat with all kinds of good salt marsh vegetation for this turtle to feed on, and a nice protected area for them to hopefully stay out of trouble. So we were really excited to get Andre back out there. And the other green sea turtle patient that we've got currently in-house, like Jeff mentioned, is Waterloo. Waterloo came in on August 29th. And you can see, now again, I talk about, some things change throughout their progress, throughout their rehabilitation stay. And if you look at the picture on the left, that's actually at Waterloo's intake. So on admit. And then if you look at the next picture, it actually looks a little bit worse when you're looking at some of those wounds. And that's actually a natural thing. As we get animals that have come in that have had some predatory wounds or other types of necrotic wounds, that tissue and that bone is going to start to die back. And it's gonna take a while to look, it's gonna look worse before it starts to look better. But as Jeff mentioned, this one did have some shark bites. This was an interesting case, if I remember correctly, Lynn. This turtle was way up past the high tide line, up on the beach. So they obviously were probably not thriving from something else. They were already thin, they were already debilitated, so a shark was probably looking for an easy target there. But if you look in that kind of hip inguinal area, you can see some really telltale rake mark signs. Hard to see it from this picture, but also on the carapace there was some small puncture wounds and a real crescent-shaped rake mark that we could see that really indicated shark bite. But some of these wounds that you see on the plastron, some of them were from the shark bite. Some of them were really just almost like bed sores from an animal that's been sick and resting on the bottom for quite some time. And that's one of the things that we see with animals that come in debilitated like this. From whatever it is that gets them to that point, we don't always know, but the good thing is we're going to treat all those symptoms the same way. And you can see the progression. That picture there, the second to the right, was just on Friday. And so that's a real recent picture. You can see how well everything is healing. All of those wounds are healing great. The turtle's putting on weight, and they are well on their way to a healthy rehabilitation and hopefully release. You can see Waterloo there at the end, happy and swimming around looking for more food. But I'm not sure if we're going to have much time for questions, but if there are any questions that y'all have, please let me know. Grace and Allie and I would love to talk to you all about anything that we've got going on at the Sea Turtle Care Center or any of the patients that we might have right now. But I want to thank you all so much. Thanks to DNR, obviously, of course, for everything they do, for all the transporters, the rescuers, the nesting teams all across the state that are helping to conserve sea turtles. And we're just happy that we get to do our little part to help with that when they make it to our hospital as well. Thank
Melissa, thank you again. It was a real treat to be able to hear how some of our patients are doing. Waterloo, by the way, was a really, really interesting. You saw the picture of the beach patroller carrying a juvenile green. Well, the truck was still out on the beach doing bird banding with Aaron, and I had no way to get way out there. So I called Beach Patrol. They picked me up, and the two of us drove out there to get this turtle and find this turtle. We could only take the truck just so far because the big cut, anybody that's been on the truck or been out that way knows, was way too deep, and the current was way too strong to be able to drive the truck through it. So we parked the truck and we walked for maybe a quarter to a half a mile before we finally found this turtle. And Melissa had asked me, do you want to come in for the intake? Which, yes, I normally do. But that particular day, I had to meet Helen Farr at 2 o'clock because we were picking up nest posts and screens before Idalia hit. So I never did get to see him. But man, he looks good now. Anyway, I'd like to ask all of you, please take a pumpkin home. We've got, if I could have a few people who would be willing to take 2 or 3 tablecloths each, both the round and the rectangular ones, home to wash and dry and then return to me. I'd really appreciate it. I do want to keep the leaves that the pumpkins are sitting on. So there is a plastic shoebox up there that we can pile them in, or even just pile them on the table when you take the tablecloth. But thank you all so very much for the wonderful food, for the attendance. I'm sure you enjoyed all of the presentations. Thank you, presenters. As always, you've done a fabulous, fabulous job. Thank you, everyone.